So the question is this: when you're the head of a big organisation and things appear to be going wrong, do you try and save the organisation, or do you try to save the people who are being mashed under the great wheels of the juggernaut that you are supposed to be controlling? Now, I'm going to be talking mostly about the post office scandal. But as you will see, this is something that goes much further than the post office. In fact, it goes all the way to the systems by which we are governed. And I'll prove it to you. Okay, I'm Granniopteryx. Look, recently there have been several big organisation scandals. One of them is the infected blood scandal, where in the 1970s, here, I'll show you this clipping from the House of Lords inquiry, between 1970 and the early 1990s, more than 30,000 NHS patients were given blood transfusions or treatments that required blood products, and they were many of them bought from abroad, I think principally from America, where oversight was not that great either, and the blood products were contaminated with hepatitis C or HIV. Over 3,000 people have died as a result, and thousands are even now living with ongoing health conditions. I read about one woman who'd had hepatitis C for 30 years, and the doctor kept telling her she was drinking too much and that's why her liver was suffering, and she had actually stopped drinking alcohol completely, but they didn't believe her. That sort of thing. And the problem was that the NHS was so desperate for the blood, which it couldn't make up from domestic sources, that it willfully ignored problems that might be happening from oversight or lack of oversight with blood bought from places like America. I don't think it was exclusively America, by the way. I haven't gone into that. I'm talking about the post office, but it's the same thing. Now, apparently, there is a group of NHS doctors who have been whistleblowing. This is another matter, and they've got together, inspired by the Postmasters organisation, which was brought together by somebody called Alan Bates, who was a postmaster who was accused of hanky-panky with the accounts, and it turned out to be the Horizon software, which the post office refused to acknowledge. And now the NHS doctors are getting together for the same reasons. So what you've got here is the NHS as a big organisation and the post office as a big organisation. And of course, when you're employed by a big organisation, there are two things going on here. First is you may feel loyalty towards that organisation to the extent that you will blind yourself about its faults. And the other thing is that the big organisation can easily sack you. And so you're not that secure in your job. And because of that, you don't want to admit you're wrong, or you don't want to possibly get into trouble with your superiors. And so you're worried about them. So there's pressures not to reveal faults. And it actually starts at the bottom. There's a chap called Stephen Bradshaw who was a low-level operative, and it was his job to go round and question sub-postmasters when accounts turned out not to square up. But he turned out to be a bit of a bully, and obviously he felt like he was in a lot of a bully actually. He felt like he was in a big organisation and he was important and he could get at these sub-postmasters. And indeed, one of his, he wasn't the only one, I just happened to know this one, they were Yeah, they had a poor opinion of a lot of the sub-postmasters because of their cultural or ethnic background. Let's just keep it that way. A post office investigator who has been described as having a heavy footprint in the Horizon IT scandal is due to give evidence, it says here, and this was in January. Stephen Bradshaw is scheduled to give evidence. He's been accused by Merseyside sub-postmistress Rita Threlfall of asking her for the colour of her eyes and what jewellery she wore before saying, "Good, so we've got a description of you for when they come." I suppose he means the police. And you can see the bullying, how he thinks he's such a big guy. But you see, what was happening was he was passing this information up the line to people increasingly remote from the problem, and many of them who didn't understand the computer systems at all. In any case, it was all the black arts to them. Mr. Bradshaw was due to answer questions in November, but disclosure failings from the post office. So you see, again, they were dragging their feet because the ones higher up had no investment in getting the truth out. This would reflect on them. And if they were loyal to the post office, it would reflect badly on the post office. He was due to answer questions, but disclosure failings from the post office meant the hearing was delayed until Thursday. Earlier in phase 4, a former post office lawyer apologised for prosecuting Miss Brennan, who was left homeless with her young daughter after being wrongly convicted of theft. And that's a good example of the sort of things that went wrong. Teresa Williamson said she was angry that material concerning the faulty computer system was not disclosed. And here I'll get you a clip about that Teresa Williamson. Let's find it. This is from the Law Society Gazette. It says, post office solicitor gutted for victim, but says she was kept in the dark. A former in-house solicitor for the post office has apologised for her role in charging an innocent woman, but insisted she was not given any information which might have raised earlier doubts about the Horizon IT system. Teresa Williamson said there were structural problems with the working culture at the post office, which caused the criminal team to be kept in the dark. Well, yeah, that's what I just said. Now, I just want to go from Stephen Bradshaw to Paula Venables, who was the top end of the post office.
You don't answer the question, how could you not have known? What's the answer to that question that the chief executive of Royal Mail Group is asking you? How could you not have known?
This is a situation that is so complex. It's a question I have asked myself as well.
Now, I want you to note the language that she's using. And it's not her specifically. This is part of a way of speaking which you see a lot. And she had a positive talent in being able to use this sort of language. Oh yeah, I wanted to find an email from Dame Moya Green. The post office dragged their heels. They did not deliver documents. That's right. They had no reason to turn documents in on time. So things got delayed and delayed. They did not compensate people. Paula, you appealed the judge's decision. So at one point, a judge said, this is the decision that this person has to be compensated, and Venables actually appealed it, which put it off even more. Now, I don't know whether she appealed it off her own initiative, or whether she was told to by the lawyers who were working for the good of the post office, not the good of the falsely accused people. And she says, I can't support you now after what I have learnt. And I can't find it now, but in one of the other emails she said, how could you not have known? Let's go back to Jason Beer's question.
How could you not have known?
This is a situation that is so complex. It's a question I have asked.
Right. So, first of all, what she said was, this is a situation so complex. She didn't say, this was something I didn't understand. Do you see how she's externalized it all? But she's putting it in such a way that unless you're actually sitting down and watching the video and analysing it, it sort of goes over your head.
Myself as well. I have learned some things that I didn't know as a result of the inquiry. And I imagine that we will go into some of the detail of that. I wished I had known.
That's not the issue. The question is, how come you didn't?
Which is, you see, he's actually pushing for her, but she's managed to avoid it so far.
I think the question then is which question am I trying to answer? That the inquiry, that there were two trials. There was the Common Issues trial and there was the Horizon Issues trial. If I take the Common Issues trial, I did know a number of aspects that came up during that trial and where Judge Fraser found that the Post Office needed to change its practices and its contract. In terms of the onerous nature of the contract...
Can you hear any information there about why she didn't know? No. Well, I can't. I don't understand what she's talking about. And I'm not sure that she does either.
I was in the board meeting where the board reviewed that contract as a result of the Linklaters advice, which we touched on previously, and we were given very straightforward advice that the contract was an acceptable contract.
Right. So that's the sort of talk that sounds good in an interview situation, but when you're actually trying to figure out what she's saying, there's nothing there. Now, there's this. When she's saying that she didn't know what was going on.
Correct.
And yet, minutes later, this.
I was sometimes criticised for being too curious and stepping too much into people's territory.
So she says she didn't know, but then she was criticised. But when she did ask questions, she was criticised for being too curious. She was too intimidated by that to actually go any further. And I reckon that's why she was the boss. A lot of people were just pushing her. They pushed her, they sort of squeezed her to the top because she was easily manipulable. Now, does that sound familiar to anybody here? We seem to have developed a culture of companies and political organisations where a semi-competent is pushed to the top and is supported by a lot of people who have an interest in keeping the figurehead there, but who are not interested in anything below them. They're just interested in drawing their salaries. And so you get a situation like this. This is one of the solicitors, a woman called Mandy Talbot. Talbot was named during submissions in July as having tried to keep an expert's report into the reliability of the Horizon IT system out of the public domain. She reckoned that was her job. She had to defend the post office, and so she deliberately tried to keep evidence that would have exonerated an accused person out of the public domain. It's a lot of smallish people doing little things, and between the lot of them they created this whole vicious, horrible structure which killed people. Here's another bit from, I'm assuming this is also from the Law Society Gazette. Williams noted that each of the witnesses denied there'd been a deliberate decision to withhold relevant documents from the inquiry. I'm sure many of them actually thought that. But this is the result. Let me just give you the case of Lee Castleton. Stephen Dilley, a partner with Womble Band Dickinson, will appear on Thursday to be questioned about the conduct of civil proceedings against Lee Castleton. Dilley was named in Castleton's witness statement to the inquiry published last year, in which the former Bridlington sub-postmaster, that's Lee Castleton, claimed that he was contacted by Dilley, representing the post office, who urged him not to go ahead with a hearing and to drop his defence. Castleton was eventually made bankrupt after a week-long trial in which he was unrepresented. Having been forced, so he was sort of strong-armed into not representing himself. Having been forced to close his shop and sell his home, Castleton and his wife moved to rented accommodation in a different town. His children were bullied and had to move schools, and his wife suffered seizures brought on by the stress. And they are by no means the only ones. And it's all to do with this structure where you get a semi-competent at the top and a lot of people who are invested in keeping this pyramid straight. You can help my channel by clicking like, by subscribing, by clicking the notification bell, and by sharing if you're so inclined. Links to my other channels are in the description, also links to donation sites, but really the best way you can help me is simply by clicking like. Thank you. And it is, as you will probably have already worked out now, it happened in the post office, it's happening in government. And you can see why people like Donald Trump are so hated. Because they are the sort of people who are going to ask questions all the way down the line. They're going to create waves. And the last thing those people in that pyramid, the last thing they want is the waves. And fortunately in America, you have a chance in the next elections. But in Britain, we don't have a chance. I can't see a chance because both of the big political parties are using the same structure. Right, well, that's it for the time being. Till next time. Why not treat yourself or a favoured relative or friend to these magnificent examples of merch? The mugs and t-shirts come in the granniopteryx design or Granbo with a firearm or the more deadly knitting needles. Go to www.granniopteryx.com and whatever platform you're watching this on, please click like, subscribe and share.